You think you know Switzerland, but did you know the Alps are still growing each year as tectonic plates collide beneath your feet? High in these mountains lie glaciers so massive, they carve entire valleys and feed rivers that cross half of Europe. Some peaks drop more than a vertical kilometer in a single face of rock and ice. And beneath the surface, the world's longest railway tunnel stretches for over 57 kilometers, running straight through the Alps. If you're ready to see a Switzerland most people never imagine, don't miss what comes next. Did you know that Switzerland is home to the largest glacier in the entire Alps, the Aletsch Glacier? Stretching more than 20 kilometers and holding billions of tons of ancient ice. Much of the country sits on rock that is older than the dinosaurs, formed long before the Alps even existed. In winter, some regions rise above the inversion layer, meaning you can literally stand above the clouds for days, watching the valleys below disappear under a sea of mist. Beneath the mountains runs one of the most impressive engineering projects on Earth, the Gotthard Base Tunnel. The world's longest railway tunnel at over 57 kilometers, cutting straight under the Alps. Switzerland is also the birthplace of Europe's great rivers. The Rhine, Rhone, and Inn all begin in its high mountains before flowing to 3 different seas. The country holds over 1,500 lakes, formed by retreating glaciers and carved into the landscape over millennia. The iconic Matterhorn is famous for its nearly perfect pyramid shape, with each face pointing toward a cardinal direction. In many alpine regions, villages sit on slopes so steep and remote they can only be reached by cable cars instead of roads. And across much of the Alps, you can walk on limestone that was once the floor of an ancient ocean, uplifted into mountains by the collision of continents. Deep within the Bernese Alps lies Lauterbrunnen, set in one of the narrowest glacial valleys in Switzerland. The valley floor runs flat and enclosed, while sheer limestone walls rise almost vertically on both sides. These cliffs extend for kilometers, forming a long corridor of rock that feels carved from a single stroke of ice. The Valais Lucerne flows through the center, a cold, fast river fed by meltwater from high slopes and hanging glaciers. Water falls from the cliffs in thin streams and sudden drops. Dozens of cascades emerge from ledges and gaps far above, some falling freely into the air before drifting into mist long before reaching the ground. The cliffs create a sense of height that remains constant. Even low clouds sit far below the summits, hidden behind the valley walls. Above the rim, the terrain opens into high meadows, plateaus, and scattered hamlets perched on shelves that look down into the deep valley. East of Interlaken lies Lake Brienz, a long, narrow basin carved by glaciers that once pressed deep into the valley. The lake holds a distinct turquoise color, created by fine mineral sediments carried down from the surrounding mountains. Steep slopes fall almost directly into the water, leaving only small stretches of flat land where villages sit close to the shoreline. The terrain around the lake rises in abrupt lines. Forests cover the lower slopes before giving way to cliffs and ridges that climb toward the higher peaks of the Bernese Oberland. Streams descend from hanging valleys and hidden basins, cutting through rock as they drop toward the lake, forming narrow gorges and cascading channels along the way. Movement follows the shape of the basin. Roads trace the shoreline in tight curves, pressed between rising slopes and the water's edge. Ferries travel the length of the lake in long runs, passing between cliffs that narrow the view to only water and stone. At the bend of the Rhine lies Basel, a city set where the river turns sharply before flowing north toward Germany and France. The water divides the city into two halves, moving in a steady, cold current that reflects bridges, stone embankments, and rows of tightly packed buildings rising from the banks. The terrain around the city is subtle but influential. Hills from the Jura range approach from the west, while the Rhine plain opens wide to the north and east. Neighborhoods follow these contours, spreading along the river and then climbing gradually into higher ground. Roads and tram lines trace the curve of the water before branching into districts built on older trade routes that once crossed the region. In the center of Switzerland, Bern occupies a sandstone ridge carved by a looping bend of the Aare River. The water circles the old city in a broad arc, its glacial blue surface moving fast and cold beneath stone bridges. From above, the peninsula of streets appears suspended between riverbanks, held in place by the curve of the valley. The land rises sharply beyond the loop. Neighborhoods climb the slopes in layers, following roads that cut through terraces and wooded ridges. The old town sits highest, its rows of arcades and steep roofs aligned along the crest, while the river lies far below, bordered by gravel paths and long strips of green. Behind the city, the terrain opens toward the Alps. On clear days, high peaks stand on the horizon, their white summits visible above the rooftops. Closer hills send streams down into the Aare, feeding the river that shapes the city's form. West of Interlaken lies Lake Thun, a long, deep basin formed where glaciers once carved a path between rising alpine ridges. The lake stretches toward the lowlands in a narrowing corridor, its water shifting from dark blue in deeper sections to lighter tones near the shallows and river mouths. Steep slopes descend directly into the shoreline, creating a coast of cliffs, terraces, and small inlets where the land briefly flattens. The surrounding terrain controls the shape of the lake. Ridges from the Bernese Oberland fall toward the water in angled lines, their forests and rocky faces creating a jagged outline along the horizon. Villages sit on narrow shelves between mountain and shore, their buildings aligned with the limited space the land allows. Roads follow the lake's edge in tight curves, pressed between rising slopes and the water below. Weather moves along the length of the lake. Winds from the west push across its surface, forming waves that reflect shifting clouds and sudden breaks of sun. At the center of Switzerland lies Lucerne, set where the Reuss River flows out of a long branching lake. The water narrows as it enters the city, passing under covered bridges and stone embankments before rushing north in a faster, tighter channel. On both sides, streets rise from the river toward hills lined with houses, towers, and old walls that follow the contours of the slopes. Lake Lucerne stretches southward in twisting arms, each one bordered by steep mountains that fall directly into the water. Clouds gather around the peaks in shifting layers, and ferries travel between villages tucked along the coves and narrow bays. Near the city, the lake widens, creating a calm basin where boats and paddle streamers turn slowly across the surface. Above the rooftops, the terrain climbs into forested ridges and open viewpoints. Between two lakes lies Interlaken, set on a narrow plain carved by water and framed by steep alpine walls. Lake Thun stretches to the west in long, deep blue corridors, while Lake Brienz extends to the east in colder, brighter tones. The Aare River links them, cutting through the center of the town in a swift channel of glacier-fed water. The land funnels everything. Streets run along the flat ground between the lakes, while beyond the edges, the terrain rises sharply into ridges that block the horizon. These slopes tighten the valley, creating a natural gateway leading toward the higher Alps. Trails and roads push upward through narrow gaps, following gorges and riverbeds toward distant peaks. In every direction, the mountains dominate the view. Sheer cliffs and forested slopes rise abruptly from the valley floor. And on clear days, the higher snowfields appear above the lower ridges, separated by layers of shadow and light. The lakes mirror these forms, their surfaces shifting with wind that slides down from the mountains. At the upper end of the Matter Valley lies Zermatt, a village surrounded by steep alpine walls that rise sharply on all sides. The valley narrows as it climbs, its floor cut by the rushing Vispa River, a torrent fed by ice fields and high glaciers. Wooden houses and stone roofs cluster along the slopes, built on ground that inclines the moment it leaves the riverbank. The land dictates every movement. Streets run in tight corridors between buildings before tilting upward into paths that lead toward meadows and forested ridges. Beyond the last houses, the terrain rises immediately into rocky slopes where cable lines, tunnels, and mountain tracks push into higher altitudes. Above these layers, the ridgelines break into open rock, ice, and snow. High above the Lauterbrunnen Valley lies Mürren, built on a narrow terrace that clings to the western rim of the gorge. The village sits on a ledge suspended between steep forested slopes below and rising cliffs behind, its position defined entirely by the shape of the mountain wall. From its edge, the valley drops nearly a kilometer straight down, a vertical descent that reveals the river and meadows far below. The terrain around Mürren rises and falls in abrupt lines. Paths follow the ledge in gentle curves before tilting upward toward higher pastures and ridges. Beyond the last houses, the land climbs quickly into open slopes, where rock outcrops and alpine grasses mark the approach to the peaks above. On clear days, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau stand directly across the valley, their faces visible in sharp detail. At the north end of Lake Zurich lies a city shaped by water and hills. The Limmat River cuts through its center, flowing clear and fast as it leaves the lake and threads between old stone quays and modern bridges. The land rises quickly on both sides, creating terraces of streets that climb into wooded slopes and neighborhoods perched above the water. The city spreads outward in layers. narrow lanes in older districts sit close to the river, while wider boulevards extend toward the foothills. Trams run along the shoreline and through the valleys, their tracks following routes that have connected the area for generations. Above them, glass towers and office blocks stand beside centuries-old buildings, the mix of forms shaped by limited space between hills and lake. From the higher ridges, the view stretches across the rooftops to the water below. The lake opens toward distant mountains, its surface shifting with wind and light. Along the shore, ferries move steadily between towns, their wakes cutting across the calm water. At the western tip of Lake Geneva lies a city shaped by water and borders. The Rhone flows out of the lake in a swift, clear channel, cutting a straight line through the center before bending toward the lowlands of France. Hills rise gently around the basin, their slopes dotted with houses, forests, and vineyards that look down toward the long stretch of water. The city sits close to the lake, built along narrow peninsulas and riverbanks where bridges thread the districts together. Streets follow the edges of the shore before climbing into neighborhoods set higher on the hills. In the distance, the Jura Mountains form a broad ridge, while the Alps rise sharply to the southeast, their peaks visible on clear days. Along the lake, ferries and small boats cross between harbors, creating ripples that spread toward the far shoreline. Winds from the Alps sweep across the water, carrying weather that can shift quickly between calm and storm. Stretching across southern Switzerland, the Valais Alps form one of the highest and most rugged mountain regions in the country. Long chains of 4,000-meter peaks rise in continuous walls, their ridges running from the Mischabel Group to the Monte Rosa Massif, before circling toward the Mattertal and the upper Rhone Valley. The range is defined by steep rock faces, hanging glaciers, and sharp divides where the terrain drops thousands of meters into narrow valleys. Glacier systems dominate the upper elevations. The Gorner, Aletsch, Zermatt, and Findel glaciers carve deep channels through the mountains. Their surfaces marked by crevices and bands of debris carried down from high cirques. Meltwater gathers into swift streams that descend through gorges before spreading across the broader Rhone Valley floor. On the northern shore of Lake Geneva lies Lausanne, a city built directly into the slopes that rise from the water. The land climbs sharply, creating a series of natural terraces where streets, rail lines, and neighborhoods stack above one another. From the lakefront, the city appears vertical, its buildings stepping uphill toward ridges that overlook the water. The terrain controls every direction of movement. Roads run steeply upward through narrow corridors, bending around cliffs of old stone and passing under bridges that connect different levels of the city. Trams and trains ascend the slopes in gradual climbs, tracing routes that follow the natural folds of the hillside. Below, Lake Geneva stretches wide and calm. Ferries move across its surface toward the mountains of France, their wakes cutting long lines that reflect the changing light. Along the water, promenades extend toward small harbors where boats shift with the wind. In the southern reaches of Switzerland lies Lugano, a city pressed between steep mountains and the long curve of its lake. The shoreline bends into narrow bays and wooded peninsulas, while the land behind the water rises sharply into slopes covered with chestnut forests and winding roads. From the lake, the city appears layered, its districts climbing the hills and terraces that catch the light. The terrain shapes every movement. Streets ascend in steep lines from the waterfront, passing through stairways, tunnels, and switchbacks that cut into the hillside. Funicular tracks climb directly toward higher neighborhoods, their routes rising above rooftops to reach vantage points overlooking the lake. The water stretches south toward Italy, a corridor framed by mountains that fall almost straight into its depths. In eastern Switzerland, St. Gallen rises across a series of rolling hills that descend toward the valleys below. The city does not sit on a single plain, but stretches across uneven ground, its streets climbing and falling as they connect the ridges. From above, rooftops appear layered in steps, following the natural contours carved by streams that once ran through the area. The terrain creates narrow corridors of movement. Roads bend around slopes and follow shallow depressions, while stairways cut upward between buildings to reach higher streets. Trams and buses run along these curved routes, linking neighborhoods built tightly against the hillsides. In the lower areas, small channels and parklands trace the paths of old waterways that shaped the land long before the city grew over them. Forested slopes border the urban edge, rising into ridges that overlook the valley. Trails lead from the outskirts into quiet woods, where the ground underfoot dips and lifts with the terrain. At the border of Switzerland and Italy rises the Matterhorn, a lone peak shaped into a near-perfect pyramid of stone. Its four faces fall away in steep plains, meeting in sharp ridges that run toward the valleys below. The upper walls are bare and dark, swept clean by wind and ice, while the lower slopes break into ledges of rock, snowfields, and shifting debris. The mountain stands apart from the surrounding range. Other peaks form long chains and wide ridgelines, but the Matterhorn rises as an isolated tower. Its summit cutting abruptly into the sky. Weather gathers around it quickly. Clouds form and disperse along the ridges, sliding over the peak in thin veils or hiding it entirely in storms. North of the Swiss plateau, the Rhine narrows into a channel of fast, compressed water before dropping in a broad curtain over a limestone ledge. The river divides into several streams as it falls, crashing against rock islands that stand firm in the middle of the cascade. These pillars break the flow into surging sections, sending spray upward in steady clouds that drift across the surrounding cliffs. The landscape around the falls is shaped by the river's long retreat. Upstream, the water runs calm and wide, but as it approaches the drop, the current accelerates, tightening between stone banks that guide it toward the edge. Below the falls, the river gathers again in a turbulent basin, its surface churning as it absorbs the weight of the drop. From there, it pushes downstream in powerful swells that gradually flatten into a slower, broader flow. Along the northern shore of Lake Geneva stretch the terraced slopes of Lavaux. A landscape carved into thousands of narrow steps that run for kilometers across the hillside. The terrain rises steeply from the water, leaving little flat ground, so walls of stone hold each terrace in place, creating long horizontal lines that follow the natural curve of the land. From the lake, the entire slope appears layered, a continuous sequence of ledges set into the incline. The terraces shape the movement of the region. Paths run along the narrow walls, tracing the edges between rows of vines before turning sharply to climb toward higher levels. Villages sit on small shelves where the land allows wider ground, their roofs aligned with the terraces around them. Stone stairways cut upward through tight corridors, connecting one level to the next in steep, direct climbs. In the Valais Alps stands the Eiger, a mountain defined by its severe geometry and exposed faces. Its most imposing wall rises on the north side, a vertical sweep of dark limestone and ice that climbs more than a kilometer from the valley floor. The surface is broken by ledges, chimneys, and vast slabs, where snow clings in thin layers, shaped constantly by wind and falling rock. The mountain narrows toward the summit ridge, where the stone steepens into a sharp crest, linking it to the Monk and Jungfrau. Weather shifts abruptly along this ridge. Clouds drift in from the west and gather against the wall, covering the face in mist while sun still reaches the flanks on the opposite side. Below the peak, glaciers press against the base, their meltwater feeding streams that carve into the valley. From the lower slopes, the Eiger appears as a sheer barrier, its vertical wall dominating the landscape. Higher up, ridges and snowfields extend outward, connecting the mountain to the larger chain of peaks that frame the region. In a deep alpine valley beneath the Bernese peaks lies Grindelwald, a village surrounded by steep walls of rock, forest, and ice. The valley opens only slightly before narrowing again toward the higher mountains, its floor shaped by glaciers that once filled the entire basin. The Lucerne River runs through the center in a cold, fast stream, carrying meltwater from the slopes above. The surrounding terrain rises abruptly. Meadows sit on ledges and wide terraces, but beyond them, the land tilts sharply upward into forests and long ridgelines. Higher still, the rock becomes exposed, forming cliffs and outcrops that mark the approach to the great north walls of the region. Glaciers press down from the heights, their creviced surfaces feeding streams that cut into the valley floor. Paths and mountain tracks follow the natural structure of the landscape. They wind through pastures before climbing toward moraines, glacier tongues, and viewpoints perched on shelves of rock. In the high Alps south of the Jungfrau region lies the Aletsch Glacier, the largest stream of ice in the Alps. It begins in the vast accumulation basin of the Concordia Plats, where several tributary glaciers merge into a single white expanse. From this plateau, the ice flows southward in a long sweeping arc, bending around ridges and cliffs as it descends through the valley. Its surface is marked by deep crevices, pressure ridges, and dark medial bands formed from rock carried down from the surrounding peaks. The terrain shapes the glacier at every point. Steep walls rise on both sides, their slopes dropping directly to the edges of the ice. Above these walls stand the summits of the Bernese Alps. Sharp ridgelines, hanging snowfields, and exposed rock faces that cast long shadows across the glacier. Meltwater sinks into cracks on the surface, feeding hidden channels that run beneath the ice before emerging far downstream. High in the Engadin Valley lies St. Moritz, set beside a long, narrow lake surrounded by broad alpine slopes. The valley floor sits over 1,800 meters above sea level, giving the region a crisp, high mountain atmosphere, even though the surrounding peaks rise much higher. The land opens wide here, forming a broad corridor where sunlight moves freely across the basin, reflecting off the lake in shifting bands of silver and deep blue. The terrain rises gently at first, then steepens into forests and ridges that climb toward the higher mountains. Streams descend from the upper valleys, cutting channels through the meadows before feeding into the lakes that line the Engadin. In winter, the basin holds cold air, while the slopes around it remain shaped by persistent winds sweeping down from the passes. Above the town, the mountains form a series of long ridgelines and glaciated summits. Cable routes and paths follow natural breaks in the slopes, reaching higher plateaus where the view expands across the entire valley system. East of the Swiss plateau lies Lake Walen, a long, deep lake pressed between steep limestone walls and narrow strips of shoreline. Its shape follows a fault line carved by ancient glaciers, creating a basin where the water drops sharply just meters from the shore. From many points along the edge, the lake appears wedged between cliffs that rise so close and so steeply that villages sit only where the land briefly opens. On the northern side, the Churfürsten peaks form a continuous wall. Their vertical faces rise directly from the water, lifting into ridges and spires that catch the first and last light of the day. On the southern side, the terrain softens slightly before climbing into forested slopes and scattered meadows. But the valley remains tight, offering only narrow ground for roads and paths to follow. High in the Bernese Alps rises the Jungfrau, a broad glaciated peak whose slopes descend in long arcs of snow and ice. Unlike the sheer walls of the Eiger, the Jungfrau spreads outward in wide flanks that gather the region's accumulation of snow, feeding glaciers that stretch deep into the valleys. Crevices cut the surface in blue fractures, and cornices form along the ridges, where wind shapes the drifting snow. The summit stands above a network of glaciers that meet at the upper basin of the Aletsch region. This area forms a vast plateau of ice where the surface appears almost level before it drops away into long curving flows that move slowly south and west. Weather arrives quickly at this altitude. Clouds wrap the summit in shifting layers, clearing for brief moments that reveal the surrounding peaks. High above Kandersteg lies Lake Lucerne, a turquoise basin held in place by towering cliffs and long slides of rock. The lake sits at the foot of a semicircle of peaks, where the Les Alpes Massif sends glaciers and meltwater down steep channels that feed the cold, clear water. The shoreline is narrow and uneven, shaped by landslides, moraines, and the steep descent of the surrounding slopes. The terrain rises immediately from the lake's edge. Forests cover the lower inclines, but higher up the walls shift into bare limestone tiers, each layer marked by fractures and ledges carved by ice. Waterfalls drop from these heights in thin, white streams, falling from hanging valleys that cling to the cliffs. Snowfields linger well into summer, their melt forming rivulets that disappear into the rock before reappearing near the lake. East of Zermatt rises the long ridge of Gornergrat, a high alpine spine that extends above 3,000 meters and overlooks one of the largest glacial basins in the Alps. The ridge narrows as it climbs, its rocky crest exposed to wind that sweeps uninterrupted across the open heights. From its flanks, broken stone and patches of alpine grass give way to fields of boulders shaped by centuries of frost. Below the ridge lies the Gorner Glacier, a massive system of ice that flows through several converging channels. Its surface stretches in pale blue arcs, marked by crevices and dark bands of debris carried from the surrounding peaks. The ice moves slowly down the valley, its scale visible from the height of the ridge, where the full length of the glacier system comes into view. To the west, the Matterhorn stands in clear isolation, its sharp pyramid rising above lower ridges. To the south and east, rows of 4,000-meter peaks form a broad amphitheater of rock, snow, and ice. Above Interlaken rises Harder Kulm, a forested ridge that lifts sharply from the valley floor. The slope climbs in a steady tilt, covered in dense woodland that grows thicker as it approaches the crest. From below, the ridge forms a long, dark edge against the sky, separating the flat land between the lakes from the higher mountains behind it. The ascent follows the natural incline, moving through thick stands of beech and fir before reaching the open viewpoints near the summit. From this height, the terrain spreads in two directions. Lake Thun stretching west in deep blue, and Lake Brienz extending east in brighter, colder tones. Between them lies the narrow plain of Interlaken, divided by the fast-moving Aare River. At the entrance of the Lauterbrunnen Valley, Staubbach Falls drops from a high cliff, where the rock wall rises more than 250 meters above the valley floor. The water falls in a long, unbroken descent, thinning into mist as it meets the air and drifts away in shifting veils before reaching the ground. The cliff face behind it is nearly vertical, a smooth sweep of limestone shaped by glaciers that once filled the valley. The surrounding terrain narrows the view. The valley floor lies flat and enclosed, while steep walls rise straight upward on both sides. Staubbach stream emerges from a higher plateau, flowing only briefly before reaching the edge where it drops freely into open space. Winds from the valley push the falling water sideways, scattering it across the rock and changing patterns that shift with light and weather. On the northeastern curve of Lake Geneva lies Montreux, a city built along one of the widest and calmest sections of the shoreline. The land rises sharply behind it, forming steep slopes that climb into the foothills of the Alps. Neighborhoods spread upward in layers, their streets following narrow ledges and terraces cut into the hillside. From the lake, the city appears stretched along the water's edge, with houses and gardens climbing in stepped patterns toward the higher ridges. The lake shapes the character of the place. Its surface reflects the surrounding mountains in long shifting mirrors of light. While winds move down the valley and change the color of the water from silver to deep blue. Ferries cross the basin in broad arcs, their wakes forming ripples that travel far along the shore. On a broad sun-facing plateau above the Val de Bons lies Verbier, a village set on a slope that tilts steadily toward the valley below. The land rises behind it in a series of long ridges, while the ground beneath the houses falls away in terraces shaped by centuries of erosion. From a distance, the village appears anchored to the hillside, its buildings arranged along the natural contours that guide every road and path. The surrounding terrain climbs quickly. Meadows give way to forests, and forests to exposed rock, where steep slopes lead toward the high peaks of the Pennine Alps. Streams descend from glacial basins higher up, crossing the slopes in narrow channels before dropping into the deeper valley. Paths follow these lines upward, tracing switchbacks along the ridges until they reach open plateaus where the landscape spreads in wide, uninterrupted views. In the upper Sonnenland lies Gstaad, set in a broad mountain basin where several valleys meet. The land widens here before narrowing again toward higher passes, creating a sheltered pocket of meadows, forests, and gently rising slopes. The village sits on one of these natural shelves, its streets following the slight incline that runs toward the surrounding hills. The terrain around Gstaad lifts in slow, steady layers. Pastures climb the lower slopes before giving way to darker bands of forest. Above the tree line, the mountains rise into long ridges and rounded summits that form the region's horizon. Streams descend from these heights, cutting shallow channels through the meadows and feeding the Saône River, which winds quietly through the valley floor. Paths and narrow roads follow the bends of the land, curving around hills and climbing toward higher plateaus. From these elevated points, the basin stretches out in all directions, framed by ridgelines that rise gradually rather than in sheer walls. In the upper Engadin lies the Morteratsch Glacier, a long valley glacier descending from the high peaks of the Bernina Range. It begins in a wide accumulation basin surrounded by sharp ridges and snowfields, where ice forms under constant pressure and flows slowly toward the valley. As it moves downhill, the glacier narrows into a broad tongue marked by crevices, melt channels, and dark streaks of debris carried from the surrounding rock walls. The terrain around the glacier is stark and exposed. On both sides, steep slopes rise abruptly into ridges carved by centuries of ice movement. Moraines flank the lower glacier, forming long arcs of stone and gravel that trace its former size and reveal how far it has retreated. Meltwater gathers into a cold, sediment-rich stream that winds through the valley floor, cutting a path through deposits left behind by the shrinking ice. Further up, the glacier's surface shifts between smooth, compressed snow and fractured blue ice. Seracs tower in irregular blocks, where the glacier bends over steeper ground and meltwater disappears into deep crevices before re-emerging downstream. In the center of Bellinzona rises Castelgrande, built on a long, rocky promontory that stands above the valley floor. The outcrop forms a natural barrier where two alpine routes converge, its steep slides dropping sharply toward the plain. From a distance, the castle appears fused with the stone beneath it, its walls tracing the shape of the ridge that lifts it above the town. The terrain dictates the entire structure. The plateau on top is narrow, stretching in an elongated shape that mirrors the ridge itself. Walls extend along the edges, following the contours in tight linear paths that overlook the valley from both sides. The towers rise where the rock allows firm footing, marking points where the slope falls away most abruptly. Below the outcrop, the valley widens into the Ticino Plain. Roads and river channels run along the flatter ground, framed by mountains that close in from the north and open toward the southern lowlands. The castle stands at this transitional point, positioned to watch over the passes that cut through the region. On the edge of the Swiss plateau rises Lenzburg Castle, built atop a volcanic hill that stands alone above the surrounding lowlands. The hill lifts steeply from the plains, its slopes forming a natural defensive shape long before any walls were constructed. From a distance, the castle appears anchored directly to the rock, following the contours of the ridge that pushes upward through the landscape. The approach climbs in a steady incline. Paths wrap around the base of the hill before tightening into steeper turns toward the crest. Forested sections give way to exposed stone and terraces where the ground levels briefly, revealing the full height of the outcrop. At the top, the plateau is narrow but elongated, offering a vantage point that extends over fields, river corridors, and the rolling terrain of the Aargau region. The castle's structures align with the natural formation. Walls trace the edges of the plateau, towers rise where the rock provides firm support, and inner courtyards occupy the only flat sections of the summit. In the Jura Mountains lies Creux du Vent, a vast natural amphitheater carved into a sheer limestone wall. The cirque stretches nearly 2 kilometers across, its cliffs rising in vertical tiers that drop more than 150 meters to the basin below. From the rim, the formation appears as a wide arc of pale stone, shaped by ice, erosion, and the slow retreat of ancient glaciers that once pressed against the plateau. The terrain around the rim shifts quickly. Meadows lead toward the edge before ending abruptly at the cliff line, where grass gives way to fractured limestone cut into ledges and vertical faces. Pines grow in isolated clusters along the slopes, their roots finding narrow holds in the cracks of the rock. Below the cliffs, talus fields and forested sections fill the bowl, their shapes defined by centuries of falling stone. The plateau above is broad and open. Trails follow gentle contours before leading suddenly to viewpoints where the entire amphitheater opens beneath the feet of the cliff. Switzerland is sharp, immense, and carved by the elements, where glaciers shape whole valleys, passes cross between towering ridges, and lakes settle into basins cut deep by ancient ice. If this journey through Switzerland inspired you, hit subscribe. There are many more places waiting to be explored.